Let's move to the next question. What should parents know about American education system? And Jean, can you share some insight on the fundamental educational stuff, school curriculum, and school structure from the guide counselor perspective, the educator perspective, something that you hope parents to know?
Well, I think a lot of parents, I mean, I can divide it into two different category about the parents, okay? Some of the parents, they believe American education system is kind of like really magic, so they can just bring magic to the kids. They bring happiness to the kids. It's called a happy life, happy childhood, let the kids be kids. And eventually they encourage them to be more creative. They would grow up to be like a very creative person, like a very bold. This is one side of parents, they expect that. And I think this is also one part of the group parents, they expect the school to, give the student like less stress, in order to, for them to grow up happily. So on the other side of the parents, they feel like American education system is very poor, and they just try to, simplify everything. Before they may ask you about, 1 + 1 = maybe 2, and they ask you to fill the 2. And later they don't even ask you to do that. They just give you like several apples. They ask you to draw all the apples, so they just kind of feel like, oh, why is get like simpler and simpler, it's not really good for my kids. They ask question in a certain pattern. If you ask them in a different way, they may not be able to answer the question. All right, so I would say either of them right, but they might have like many similar reasons. Okay, so personally as an educator, and I've been watching kids, starting from like very young to they getting their high school and also colleges, I found like they 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 really cannot benefit that much from the American education system. So I think most of the educators, they believe like American education system need to be improved, become a better, because they just really want to improve the education equality, but they can't really do that because you can tell education is still not like really equal. The whole system, still you have good family, you have like a financial support, you can get a better private, tutor counselor for your kids, and your kids have like full support, and then they just get a better score in school. The performance going to be better. So that's something we find out. So I would say no matter you believe in this education system or not, one thing for sure, you can't really rely on the school system to educate the kids. So their value, their perspective, their goal, and their like the whole academic performance, I would say when they are in elementary school, it all depends on the parents. And when they get a little bit older, it all depends on the foundation that they built when they were little. So in that situation, I would just say only the parents involve a lot with the kids' education. The kids might be, easily to get successful. So this is the current situation. I realize that about the American education system. Yeah, and this is why I started 7EDU, because I do not want the kids to suffer in school, because that's how we help them out. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jane. It is true. Yeah, actually, I read a research public, I think 2 years ago, talking about kids literacy at early age. Actually, by the age of 5, when they go to kindergarten, the kids who grow up with parents with advanced degree gonna knows more vocabulary than kids grow up with parents holding lower degree, because they got more language exposure from their educated parents. Think about it. When you tell a story to your kid, when you tell to explain the value behind the story, if you say, hey, this story tells us, and your kids only know tell when they try to express their value. And when you say this story reveal, this story demonstrate, this story illuminated, then the kids would be able to explore to this higher order verbs that we use in academic or technical writing. I saw Laurie is here. Laurie, do you want to add your thoughts in American education system as from the teaching perspective, because you've been teaching for more than 40 years here. You know a lot, right? Just share something with us.
The one thing that I think is important to know about the education system in America, especially private versus public, is the idea of, and you probably all heard about this idea of Common Core, And that is for public education system, they are mandated to really stick to those standards, whereas private and other types of school districts, they can have their own standards, set sometimes on a district-wide level or on the school level, but they don't have those state level standards to have to go by. However, those standards are actually a good thing if they're used appropriately. What happens sometimes is teachers get too rigidly boxed into just teaching a certain way and just teaching to those standards instead of being more innovative and creative about their lessons. So just to kind of that's a good thing to, if you're thinking of a public school, to ask about that is something you want to ask about or investigate. How do they stick strictly to these standards, and how do they do that? In private education, even if they don't have to go by specific state mandated standards, they still all have some kind of a curriculum plan and the goals, overall goals that they're aiming for. So that's a good thing to ask about. In terms of teaching, we set educational goals from the we backwards design. We set from the end back. So what do we want the students to learn, and by what time, in their or by what grade level should they be learning it? And of course, the thing to remember about that is that's what the standards kind of try to address. But the thing to remember about that is every student is individual. Every student has progresses at their own pace, and you can't necessarily you have to kind of differentiate instruction for the individual student. And that's also very much stressed in the American education system now. Didn't used to be back some time ago, but now it's something that they stress a lot, and teachers are taught very strongly how to try to teach to the learning levels and learning styles of each student that's in their class. So I wanted to kind of say that, talk about that a little bit. Yeah, and so like when I plan a unit or a stage, part of a semester, I'm always looking at what do I want the student to end up doing? What do I want them to be able to end up with? What skills? And that's really what I'm aiming for, regardless of how I do that. Whether I'm teaching a certain text in order to have them acquire these skills, the thing to remember is I'm not teaching the text. Like if I'm teaching a novel, I'm not teaching the novel. I'm teaching skills that I'm using the novel to to get these students to understand certain things and to develop certain skills. It's always really, it's very, effective teachers are basically all skill-based teachers, and they're really teaching specific skills. They're not just teaching a piece of literature, for example. So if I want to teach, for example, about irony or satire, I'm going to choose a piece of literature that embodies that and use that to teach that piece of literature. But I'm not just working on that piece of literature itself. So from I don't want to get too far off the field here as far as the difference between American education system and what makes that unique. But I do agree with what was said before about teachers that go through the public education system in general are really strongly, highly dedicated to education. And unfortunately, you don't want to say, well, they don't make enough money and that's why, but it is true that teachers are not generally in education for the money. I don't know a single teacher that says I went into education to make good money, because you're lucky if you do, but you go into it because you love teaching, and so and you love interacting with your students and seeing them learn. Okay.
Yeah, I cannot agree with. Yeah, I cannot agree with you more, Laurie. Nobody coming into the educational field to make money. We came here because we want to shape the future. We want to make impact on the younger generation, right? We have the passion about education. And it's so true that private school and public school, no matter what type of school it is, and they all have different kind of teachers. And as long as they can, using backward design, differentiate instruction to meet diverse students' needs, and I mean, your kids can bloom from there. And the most important thing is to know where they are and how we can support them. Of course, looking at the whole K through 12 education, here in the United States at the elementary school level, the course curriculum, the Common Core, Laurie just mentioned, the Common Core curriculum most public school using is a little slower. And when it comes to middle school, it's getting heavier, and high school is even heavier. And they pack most of the stuff into college. And that may explain why the high drop-off rate or low retention rate happening in the freshman year at college, because the way we set up our curriculum. So private schools see the opportunity. They start to packing things up in elementary school. We cannot say it's right or wrong, but there's definitely a way that you can help them meet up the academic goals, but also helping them develop all those what we call transferable skills that they may use in their future life as a lifelong learner. Exactly what Laurie just said. You teach a novel, it's not just novel, it's a transferable skill that you can use into other articles into your future life.